Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining CVent today to learn more about how to approach room block management for your upcoming events. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you to use the chat and Q&A areas on the right side of the attendee hub where you're viewing the webinar today. We'll be saving time at the end to answer questions. So if you have any question, please add it to the Q&A area and other viewers can see the questions and upvote their favorites so they get answered. We'll also have a few documents available for download, so please make sure to access those if you're interested. And please submit feedback after the session. It will be available to you on demand, so you can log back in to watch it in the future. And with that, let's get started. So I wanted to start by introducing myself. I'm Kelly Kopek, a product marketer at CVent, and I work on our solutions that help connect event organizers with hotels and venues, like our room block management technology, Passkey, which allows planners and hotels to work more efficiently together. And I wanted to start the session today by going over some recent findings from a planner pulse survey that we run with North Star. It's several times throughout the year. And this is our December data, which I think will be very interesting for the conversation that we're having today. December's survey in particular drew just over 400 planner responses. So you can see the responses represented planners in the association and nonprofit, corporate, and third-party spaces, with the majority of events in the 100 to 500 attendee range. So we first asked when planners' next live event was, and nearly 1/3 of the respondents produced an event in Q4 of last year. And 43% will produce an event this quarter in 2023, this first quarter. When we asked planners to tell us about 2023, 2/3 of the respondents expect to produce more meetings in 2023 versus 2022. And this is really significant because we also asked the same question in September of last year, and that's represented by the darker green in the chart. And we saw an increase in confidence when we asked in December for 2023. And that's the uptick that you see between the light green and the dark green. And while this confidence for event frequency is high, planners aren't as confident on the attendance levels for in-person events. So 31%, which is the circled amount, expect 101% or more of their 2022 attendance. So they're anticipating more attendance this year. But the rest of the respondents expect 100% or less in-person attendance this year versus 2022. So they're showing less confidence with hitting the same amount of attendance they had. And what are those top concerns that planners are thinking about? We asked this question in the survey, what are top of mind and what are concerns to planners? Cost, no surprise, is the number one concern, and it's followed by budgets. But interestingly enough, although costs and budgets are concerning to planners, the majority of respondents, they're planning to adjust their budgets to match or exceed the expected costs that they are seeing in the market. And I pulled out this comment from one of our respondents that kind of reiterates that fact. The respondent said, "We are mindful of the current state of pricing for events across the industry and are adjusting our costs accordingly, but we're updating our program to ensure that we are not exceeding our 2022 budget by an enormous amount. It requires me to be creative with our F&B and offsite events while maintaining the integrity of the event." So I think that kind of reiterates the thoughts that planners are having around their budgets. And finally, I wanted to wrap up by showing you the key takeaways from what we just went over. So 43% of planners will produce their next event in Q1. Budgets are expected to at least match cost increases. And although those budgets are flexing, cost remains the top concern for planners. And more planners expect to produce more meetings this year versus 2022. But the only drawback is those attendance levels might continue to lag based on the event. So it's clear that planners are having to do more with less and find efficiencies wherever they can to be able to host events at a high frequency within their budget. And with that, I think it's a really good segue into our conversation on room block management. So I want to bring on our other speaker, Manpreet Kaur, who is the Director of Meetings and Events here at Cvent. And she's joining us so we can chat about what her observations and strategies have been when contracting and filling room blocks for recent events. So I want to thank again Manpreet for joining us and ask if you can just give a little bit of background about yourself and your role here at Cvent.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kelly. Well, I'm Manpreet Kaur, Director of Meetings and Events at Cvent. I've been in the event planning industry for almost 14 years now. My major focus has been on the creation of unique event experiences and establishing quantifiable and integrated metrics to drive ROI of the total events program. And yeah, I'm very excited to be here to share some insights around in person events and also the room work management.
That's great. Thanks so much, Manpreet. So I'm going to jump right into it and ask you a little bit about what you're seeing with your events right now. So I shared earlier that cost remains that top concern for in-person events in 2023. So I want to know from your perspective, what do you anticipate for your 2023 Cvent in-person event program from the cost perspective?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Well, meetings and event planners should definitely expect further price increases across the board. As per, of course, the data that was shared earlier, and also as per like the recent forecast report by GBT and CWT, looks like the average cost per attendee in 2022 was around 25% higher than 2019, and this is likely to rise further 7% in 2023. Yeah. And it also said that an influx of events, fueled up with pent up demand coupled with like shorter lead times are actually driving up prices across venue hire, accommodation, F&B, and production. But the good news is that there are strategies that can help you get the most bang for your buck. For example, setting longer lead time to balance cost and risk, right? So, booking early provides the best chance of securing a top choice destination venue at the best rate possible. We need to understand that there's a high demand coming to hotels, especially in top tier cities. So planners need to set longer lead time to secure the best deal than in years past. The second strategy could be, treating your event needs as a piece of a larger puzzle. So when it comes to logistics, flexibility remains fundamental. Could you consider a shorter window or using different spaces during different season? Could you have a simpler set? Can you set up a stage in like 3 hours as compared to 24 hours? Some basic questions that one needs to answer that can help save cost overall. And then for further cost saving, I would say communication, and communication, especially with suppliers, are very critical. So communicate with suppliers to understand opportunities to reducing overhead costs. Can you coordinate your supply needs to match those of closely timed events, and how larger supply chain disruption influences pricing and lead times? So once you understand these pain points, you can try to pivot with replacement options. So yeah, these would be some insights that I would have around cost.
A lot of great points there. And you said something around longer lead times with hotels and really the importance of communicating with suppliers. And it made me think too of some of the data that we're seeing through the Cvent Supplier Network, which is one of our venue sourcing technologies that allows planners to, send RFPs to hotels. And we're seeing that planners are actually having to send more RFPs with longer lead times in order to get a space that works for them within budget. So we're seeing that they're adding 2 or more additional venues to RFPs to make sure they're securing an event space that works for them. So I think there's a lot of tactics that planners can do to make sure they're getting the options that work for them. So a lot of great points there. Thank you, Manpreet. I wanted to touch on attendance because we talked about that at the beginning in some of the data and perhaps seeing less attendance than last year. So I wanted to ask you now that we concluded 2022, we understood what attendance looked like. What are you anticipating for in-person attendance in 2023?
Well, in person attendance is definitely most likely to increase this year. We need to understand that 2022 was a year of recovery. Several industry reports have shown that although challenges still exist, there is a reason to be optimistic as we look ahead to this new year. A study done by MPI showed that 65% of the participants anticipated the business returning to 2019 levels in 2023. Now, again, virtual events have enabled the industry to survive throughout the worst of the pandemic, but it's very, very clear that they cannot replace every aspect of the in-person experience. And I personally think, the big need for networking opportunities may be the biggest driving factor for event success and attendance this year. So definitely looks very optimistic to me.
Great. And then, with in-person events coming up and the what you're thinking about those attendance rates and the optimism around attendance, I'm wondering how you're working with the hotels and approaching your room block strategy.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Well, given the fluctuation in event attendance and surge in prices, planners need to ensure that they do a proper risk analysis based on historical data and also current trends and plan for the right number of rooms before they contract. The other critical point here is to do your like doing your homework on rates and asking for more, from your hotel POC. So before you call the hotels on your list, research the best rates they offer online. Ask the group sales manager for the best rate that he or she can offer. If it's higher than the web rate, ask if you can get a better price. Also, ask if they have a complimentary policy, where they provide a free room if a certain number of rooms are secured. And I know personally, like at many hotels, you can get a complimentary room, for every 50 rooms picked up by your guest. So yes, definitely ask for more, while you're contracting. The other thing is, go over the contract with a fine tooth comb. Before you sign the contract, take a very close look at a few crucial details. Take note of the cancellation policy, like cutoff dates, attrition policy, like the price rates and also the payment terms. Again, the cutoff date is basically when the hotel expects you to have all rooms booked to ensure the block is secure. So check to see if attrition policy applies. That means you may be liable for an attrition penalty if your guests don't pick up the total number of rooms you requested. So again, to avoid potential fees, negotiate a reasonable cutoff date with your hotel POC, and make sure the contract is a win-win for both the parties, which is a planner and a hotelier.
Great. You gave a lot of great tactics for kind of working with your hotel partners in making sure the terms work for both parties. So I'm wondering, we all know that it's been a little bit challenging with hotels recently being short staffed and that in-person demand is back, right? So they're busy and space is filling up and it's harder to get kind of the one-on-one communication that may be needed. So I'm wondering, in your experience, what has it been like recently working with hotels on room block specifically to get those terms that you need?
Yeah. I personally feel like, there has been a great partnership between planners and hotels. And I also feel like, flexibility and communication plays a very crucial role here. I've seen like, both planners and hotel tries to get the best out of the deal and usually are very flexible and accommodative with the request, such as cutoff dates, cancellation policies, penalties, payment terms, etc. Even if there are certain terms that hotels cannot accept, they would always come up with an alternative solution so that there's always a balance and a win-win situation. So yeah, like, it has been a great partnership, between planners and hotels.
Great. Yeah, that's kind of I feel like there was kind of a tough time for a little bit, but now with in-person events, kind of back to 2019 levels, the partnership's been growing and strong. And that's great to hear that the terms and flexibility are being accepted and the relationship is growing. So that's great to hear. I want to specifically talk about the technology that you're using to help manage room blocks and maybe some of the specific features that are really helpful in this environment, taking into consideration attrition and attendance and budget concerns.
Great. Now that's my favorite question, I would say. Well, adopting right technology for room block helps offer attendees a higher level of customer service. So when it comes to housing, both planners and hoteliers have reason to drive the process. Hoteliers benefit because they can better manage their brand reputation while providing a differentiating service to the planner. Planners often prefer to manage the inventory in their room block as it reduces the back and forth conversation with the hotel, and also gives them the flexibility to make real time changes and access to the reports. So, to your second question, well, yes, there are many features in Passkey that has been super helpful, but my favorite and the crucial ones are. Uploading rooming lists to group blocks, like it makes our life so much easier, right? Allowing attendees to book and manage their reservation. It also gives an access to the planner to make modification to the guest booking. And then also, like, planners can control inventory in room blocks before the cutoff dates. They can also manage attrition and adjust the room block to avoid penalties. Live dashboards and reports are my absolute favorite. Anytime I want to see, like, the pickup report, I can go and get all the detailed reporting real time. And then the last favorite feature is email alerts. You can get automated emails with like vital stats or alerts as your room block fills up. So yeah, like these are some very key crucial feature that we have in Passkey, and I absolutely love using all of these features.
I'm curious to know if you've managed room blocks without technology. I know I personally have with rooming lists and manual Excel spreadsheets that you're sending to the hotel. There's a ton of room for manual error. It's just a painful process. So I'm curious if you've done it that way and just like how much more efficient it is to use Passkey.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. It is so much efficient. So, as I said, like, it reduces the back and forth conversation, right? With the hotel. Say, for example, if some guest wants to make some modification, like, they can actually do it on their own, or they can ask the planner, and we can just go and, like, do make the changes, modification on our own. And also, like, the seamless integration between Passkey and the reservation system, like, no longer like, we have to pull the reservation list, send it over manually to hotel, and they then manually sync it, like, with the reservation system. Like, it's just a seamless integration that we have with Passkey that makes like the experience very flawless. So absolutely, like, a lot of benefits one can see when they use and implement such technology.
And as companies are bringing back their larger in-person events, their tier one events, having a room block management software for sure is helpful in creating efficiencies and helping with that partnership with the hotel too in driving attendance and just being more organized and tracking um, everything. So really relevant in 2023 and certainly will be helpful to a lot of planners. I know that you have shared a few tips on what you think are great cost savers and tactics, but I wanted to see if you had any other cost saving tips to share with us related to room blocks or really any of the venue related parts of an event.
Yeah, sure. So, first of all, I would say book your venue and secure room block way in advance to get the best deal. Second is do a risk analysis. This is very crucial to the entire process, and also to secure right number of rooms. Do not overestimate the rooms you would need. Always consider 10 to 20% attrition. Research the room rates that's available online, as I mentioned before, and use that to negotiate with your hotel POC. Ask for more, and also ask, if on-site events can lower your rate. If your event allows for it, consider planning some events at the hotel, such as like a group meal or a happy hour, because total spend is a big part of booking hotels. The more you can do at the hotel, the more you will save. Adding on-site activities will definitely change how the hotel views you as a client. So the more you spend, and the more hotel services you use, the more they will see you as a VIP customer and would definitely give you preferential rates. The other tips would be negotiate. Negotiate on cancellation policy, attrition, cutoff dates, penalties, etc. Ask for complimentary rooms and other services as a part of your deal. So yeah, these are the tips. Just to summarize, by working very closely with your hotel POC, keeping event activities on site when possible, and negotiating a reasonable contract without any hidden terms, policies, or penalties, you'll actually be well on your way to successfully negotiating a hotel room block contract and ultimately saving a lot of costs.
That's great. I think you gave some really great advice there. I'm going to wrap up with the final question. If you have anything additionally to add about, working with hotels specifically, what would be your advice to planners who are kind of getting back into in-person event planning and it might be their first time working on an in-person event with a hotel?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Well, two advice I would have. First, being both targeted and flexible with RFPs, I think is more important than ever. If you're looking to secure the best deal, remember that flexibility runs both ways. The hotel know where they have rooms and meeting spaces that needs to be filled, so they are better able to identify the best deals. If you're open to a range of dates and offer to keep additional services in house, there's almost always a way to get the job done. Another consideration when building an RFP is to avoid what some term as RFP spam, which is when a planner sends their RFP to multiple cities and multiple hotels, leading to dozens of potential options. Now, you need to understand, when a busy hotel salesperson sees this, they consider their odds of winning the business low. Given the influx of leads they are managing, your lead may not be a priority, as the triage when it's in front of them, and focus on the RFP, they have a better chance of winning. So that's going to be my first advice. And then the second would be communicate your must-haves and decision timeline clearly. Again, transparency and flexibility at the RFP stage is key. So, hotel sales teams are handling an abundance of opportunities. So, providing as much information about where you are flexible and where you're not is vital to a successful negotiation. Are there contract clauses that your company requires? What's the exact timeline you need to make your decision? It is vital to communicate how long your team will need to make a decision once an offer is made. Again, one of the biggest shifts that we have seen is that the hotels experiencing is in the amount of time they have to maintain a hold. So one has to be very cognizant about this fact and lay down everything crystal clear in their RFP. Again, the more clearly you communicate your needs during the selection process, I think the lower your chances are of missing out on a once in a lifetime deal. So, yeah, like these would be the two advices that I would have.
Thank you so much, Manpreet. I think we learned a lot today about what's going on in the market and just some of those tactics and tips that we can use to get what we want from our room block management standpoint, and some of the technology with Passkey that we can use to be more efficient in our processes. I appreciate you joining us and giving us your experience and tips from an expert standpoint. Really great for you to join us today. And I'm going to wrap up and remind the audience that you can take the survey to let us know what you thought about the presentation today. We always appreciate the feedback and are trying to learn and do better with the content that we bring to you. And also, you can take a look at the upcoming CVET webinars. Make sure you register. Again, if you see a topic that you like, you can register and access it live, or you can watch it on demand if you're not available on the live date. So this is the end of the actual presentation today. If you have to jump, thank you for attending again. And we're going to stick around and answer questions in the chat and Q&A section on your right in the attendee hub. I appreciate you joining us today, and happy planning to you all.